Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. As you know, we at the JSW Center for Future of Law are doing our monthly webinar on working papers. And if you've joined earlier, you've listened to talks by by the Oxford professor. I'm losing the name at the moment, Rahul.
Professor Devganji.
Devganji, thank you. Yes, Professor Devganji, and and this month we have the faculty director, Rahul, assistant professor here, talking about his working paper, the AI Polylemma in legal education, and uh, the policy decisions that comes with that. And as discussant, we have assistant professor Darshana Mitra joining us as well. And her work has also looked at topics of human rights, and she has previously taught at NUJS. And and she will be joining us as discussant today. And I will hand it over to Rahul right now to go ahead and start. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And good evening, and thanks for joining this late December day. So I'm just going to put up my slide. You can see the slide, right, Siddharth?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
All right. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about the AI, what I call the polylemma in legal education. This is basically coming out of a 2-year project here at NLS and some personal experiences and some sort of empirical studies on the question of how do law schools deal with AI. And I'm going to explain through this presentation why our current strategies are not sufficient to deal with the generative AI problem in legal education. So to start us off, all of us know the impact that generative AI has had around the world. When ChatGPT first came out in 2023, generative AI was used by approximately 10% of the profession. So this is the first global survey conducted across countries on lawyers, and this showed that around 10% integrated AI into their work. And now the most recent survey, this is 2024 global survey, in fact, it was released in 2025, but as of last year, 79% of lawyers integrate AI in some manner into the legal profession, right? So lawyers are coming to terms with AI at a really, really fast pace, and law schools have to sort of address the challenge of what do you do in the face of this huge technological change, right? And law schools have adopted different measures of different measures of how do they deal with the question of generative AI. Some law schools take a very, very prohibitive view where they say that, like the University of Michigan Law School says that we do not allow generative AI in any form of coursework. And there are many such universities which have a full prohibition on generative AI use. So no chat GPT use in any evaluative component, no chat GPT use in examination, no chat GPT use as part of the curriculum. And any violation of these is considered a violation of the student honor codes, right? So there's this complete prohibition. On the other side of the spectrum, you have law schools that are embracing AI and basically saying that what we must do is not have a world where students don't have access to this technology and don't use this technology in their education, but instead actually have hands-on experience with it and have it as part of their curriculum, right? So law schools such as Arizona State University have basically have a permissive policy where students can use AI, and in many ways, AI is education and AI use is integrated within the curriculum. And you have law schools, of course, which have a middle path where AI is permitted in some circumstances and AI is not permitted in other circumstances, right? So talk about NLS itself. NLS has a policy where generative AI as a part of the academic and examination regulations is prohibited for evaluative work. And this is the default, although with if a faculty wants in any particular course to have a more permissive policy, that is allowed. So we're somewhere in the middle, but there are these policy choices available to law schools to deal with this question of generative AI. The problem, of course, is that this sort of policy question is dependent on the answer to several descriptive facts. And I'm going to run through these descriptive facts one after the other, and I'm calling these lemmas. And I'll tell you why later why these descriptive facts are problems, right? So the first lemma that I'm going to talk about is the fact that generative AI is virtually undetectable. And this comes from a lot of work that has been done around the world on how do we adjudicate and how do we find whether some work has been written by generative AI. And there are some stylographic features that people look for. Many of us think that we are very, very good at detecting generative AI work, but studies have shown that this is not the case. So in one study, there were 1,600 poems, some written by AI and some written by humans, circulated along to 1,600 people. They read the poems and they were asked whether the poems were written by humans or by AI, and they guessed wrong in most cases, right? They were more likely to guess that AI poems were written by humans. We did a similar study here at NLS, and these are the results. This is a forthcoming paper in the IGLT, where what we did was we took the examinations that we do here at NLS and we fed them to AI and we generated answer scripts. And then we asked students also to write answers to the same exam. We jumbled them up and then we gave it to professors here to evaluate and to tell us whether you think they're AI or human. And as you can see, in many cases, the professors went wrong, right? So blue marks AI work and green marks human work. And as you can see in ChatGPT 4, for example, and this is quite dated, this is 2024 study. In ChatGPT 4, you can see that many things were rated as human by the professors. The scripts were rated as human by professors across all subjects almost, even though they were written by AI, right? So the professors, even though, and this was not prompt engineered, this was not edited content, this is just output from ChatGPT, and the professors thought this was human. Contrary-wise, the student text was sometimes identified as AI generated, right? And the total miss percentage, the total error rate was around more than 50%, right? So it would be better, the skills of NLS professors to detect AI work in examination script was no better than a coin toss, right? So we are really, really bad at detecting AI content, even when we know the heuristics that we are judging this content based out of. But the sort of alternative and the way that many universities try and solve this is through AI detection tools such as Turnitin or GPT-0 or other tools that have come up, right? And of course, the problem here again is that even these tools are very, very bad at dealing with AI detection, right? So you can see here, this on the top right is a study done which ranked the accuracy of major detectors around the world. And you can see here, Turnitin has an accuracy of 50%, right? And this includes both false positives and false negatives. Even more challenging is, of course, if you sort of change the output in any material manner, right? So if you paraphrase the output, or if you have any adversarial techniques, right, such as just misspelling a couple of words, the accuracy drops dramatically in Turnitin, right? It becomes 7.9%, right? And just adding a sentence or two of your own, or just adding some spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes, basically makes Turnitin as bad. It's already a bad detector. It becomes a worse detector, right? And even detectors that are really, really modern and they've come in the past year and they claim to have very high accuracy, even they have some false positive rates, which is false positive is when you detect work as AI even though it is not, and false negative is you fail to detect AI work, right? And even these detectors have a high false positive rate, right? And so they're neither accurate nor reliable, right? And false positive is a real problem in academic integrity issues, right? Because when you falsely identify a human written work as AI, then the challenge, of course, is that you are basically accusing the student of using AI when the student is not, right? One free detector, for example, falsely identified 27.2% of human written academic text as AI. And of course, this is a huge problem. And I'm sure you're all aware of a case which was filed in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where a student of Jindal Global Law School, an LLM student, was accused of using AI in their assignments. Uh, they used Turnitin and they said, okay, this is 88% AI. The student went to court and said, look, that these AI detectors are not reliable and I did not use AI. And essentially the case was settled outside court and nothing came of it. But the fact remains that AI detection is an extremely unreliable enterprise, and these AI tools are extremely unbiased. What's also problematic is that these detectors are biased against non-native English speakers, right? Because they use a sort of um, parameter called perplexity, which is basically how different from usual human text. Basically, human text uh, is is sort of different from each other, right? So it is there's a lot of more diversity in human text than there is of AI text, which is much more narrow and doesn't have as much variation. And so perplexity is a measure of this kind of variation. But non-native English speakers are speakers who typically have low complexity. They do write in this formalistic language, and they are more likely, studies show they're more likely to be caught by these detectors, right? And so recognizing these problems, many universities have gone back on AI detectors, even after sort of initially contracting with companies such as Turnitin. Many universities have now said that no, we can't accept such false positive rates, and many universities have stopped using AI detectors for AI detection, right? So the first sort of descriptive fact that I want to sort of stress on the fact that AI detection is virtually impossible. You cannot detect with any amount of certainty AI text in a student's work. The second important sort of descriptive fact, lemma two, that I'm going to talk about is generative AI improves student grades, right? And again, there's a large body of empirical evidence which shows this idea that whenever you give a student AI assistance, especially in examinations where they can use AI along with their sort of, let's say, a take-home examination where they can use AI along with writing the assessment, and they can sort of substitute parts of the assessment with AI, then both the time taken for that assignment, obviously you're going to be faster because you don't have to look up certain facts, as well as the average grade that each person receives increases, right? So we know for a fact that whenever students have used AI, their grade increases in these assignments, right? And it takes lesser time to write an assignment using AI. There's also actually, by the way, variation within the kind of grade increases that you see, and the highest sort of grade increase comes from the people who perform the lowest without AI, right? So especially for people who have problems with language, who have problems with recall, AI helps a lot more, right? So what happens is that people who are sort of borderline, people who used to score uh, the lesser marks, borderline, let's say 40 out of 100, 50 out of 100, that's where you see the largest quantity, largest effect size, largest amount of grade increase. While AI helps people in the top grade as well, that effect size is much lower, right? So it also acts as an equalizer, both in terms of language as well as in terms of quality. And we know again that AI use does improve grade across the board, right? Um, and again, we can see some evidence of this in law school. This is on the left. The figure is the Minnesota law school, and you can see the marks for Intro to American Law. in both the essay and multiple choice questions go up when AI assistance is allowed, right? And the idea, of course, is that when you use AI, then you get a higher increase. Even in insurance law, you see that it's not increased, but if you sort of disaggregate the grade by the low performers and the high performers, what you'll see is that the low performers grade increases, the high performers slightly decreases, and that's why the grade remains the same, right? But suffice to say that when you use AI, the likelihood is that your grades are going to increase. We did a similar study, as I said, in NLS. Again, this is the same paper, the forthcoming IGLT paper. And again, you can see so green marks better performance than the median student. And as you can see, in most subjects, especially the top AI tools at that time, again, this is 2024. So you have these older versions. All of these models have now improved, but the top versions of AI, Claude 3, Gemini Pro 1.5, ChatGPT 4, all of them perform better than the median student in these evaluations, right? So it is important to see that, and better than, by the way, the median student that gave the examination in the first place as well, right? So it's important to see that every time people get to use AI and have AI assistance, the chances are that their grade in law school will increase, right? So that's the second descriptive lemma, right? So one, AI use cannot be detected. Two, AI improves grades in law school, right? And when you combine these two lemmas, you get a third descriptive fact that AI use, that students are incentivized to use AI. There is no way of detecting them, and they're going to get a grade increase. So the third lemma here is that students' use of generative AI is ubiquitous across law school, right? And again, there is a very strong empirical evidence on this. There's a global survey of students that happens across all universities. This is a sample size of around 16,000, and 86% of students globally regularly use AI in their studies, right? We did a couple of small surveys in NLS as well, and 70% of students in the LLM program and 95% of the sampled undergraduate students surveyed admitted to using AI in some form in their law schools, right? And so it's no longer a question of access and technical proficiency, right? It's not that they're these technically aware students who are using artificial intelligence. Every student is using artificial intelligence because they are undetectable and because using them increases their grade. And there is, of course, the idea of moral consensus on the matter, which is that the more the people use it, the more you would be encouraged to use it because everybody else is breaking the rule, so you might as well break the rule as well, right? So the moral stigma of it evaporates, and then you start using more and more tools, right? And in India particularly, what you can see is that access is not a problem, right? And now all of these companies, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, all of them offer free subscriptions to their top tier models to students, right? So if you're a student, you can sign up for ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini in India for free for an entire year, and you'll get their best model, right? And okay, so I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just quickly go through some of these. So what I did was we had a focus group discussion among students on use of AI, and we had a couple of interviews with students on the use of AI. And here you can see sort of a sampling of what students said about the question of AI use. And one thing you can see is that, again, almost everybody in law school uses AI for academic work, right? One student said that I use it for 80% of my law school assignments. Most students said that there's a shortage of time at law school, and therefore it is important that they have to use AI in order to ensure that they can get their work done and still generate a cohesive paper. And many people suggested that it is because everybody uses it, there is no stigma attached to it, and so they use it as well. So that's the third thing, right? So everybody uses AI, right? Now, of course, the question that you might have then is, what do you do about this? What do you do about the fact that everybody uses AI, right? One thing you can try, as our law school has, is try and regulate it through some form of academic policy, right? And most people try to both prohibit AI through policy or to regulate it through some disclosed use requirement, right? But students ignore policy. Again, because of the descriptive fact at lemma 2, which is, lemma 1, which is AI is undetectable, and the incentives are high because of lemma 2, prohibitory policies are often ignored by students, right? And even when there's a disclosure policy, students feel that disclosing AI use will, in some sense, bias the assessment of their, bias the evaluation of their assignment. And so even when they use AI and where there are disclosure policies, they don't disclose. Right? And there are studies, again, which show, one, that AI guidelines are not read by students, and students are not really aware of the comprehensive AI policy of their university. And two, there was a very interesting study conducted by Ali Mardani in, again, a law school environment where there were specific instructions to use AI in a particular manner, to say, okay, fine, please check your AI sources, make sure there is no hallucination, etc. And still and still students used AI in a manner which was against policy, right? So students typically ignore policy that might discourage AI use. And the other sort of thing that universities are trying to do is move the assessment patterns into more creative ways of where AI cannot be used, right? So the take-home assignment as such has been mostly eliminated in many law schools. But what people have tried to do is try to have more examinations in controlled conditions, or to have a higher role of orality or oral examinations in the way in which they test the students. But the problem again is that, one, this is besides the point. The reason that you had take-home assignments was because you wanted to test something other than just rote memory and recall and application under time pressure. You don't get to have reflective writing anymore if you remove the take-home examinations. But even then, the problem still is that people still use AI. The only thing is they use AI just before the assignment, right? So there is, again, some testimonial evidence we have of students who say that we practice the oral examination, and we build summaries of the readings or the summary of their assignments in oral examination, where they have common viva questions provided to them by AI. Or they have a way in which in before a controlled examination setting, before an end-term exam, they summarize all the readings into one chunk, and then they try and make sure that they learn what they need to, right? So it's besides the point. It tests things that we don't probably want to test, right? We don't want, the reason we had take-home exams was because we wanted to test something else, and it is limited in its ability to stop AI use. Right? So bottom line is that regulation doesn't work. Right? So why don't we then just prohibit AI? Permit AI altogether. Why don't we go the University of Arizona way and say, okay, fine, we can't regulate AI. AI use is ubiquitous. AI, people are going to continue to use AI. Why don't we just then allow universities to use the students in the universities to use AI, integrate AI into our curriculum, and go and use a completely AI first policy. But increasingly, what evidence is showing is that AI used leads to decreased critical thinking. Right? And this on the right is really, really important work by the MIT Media Lab, where essentially they tested people's brain activity when they were using AI. And what they found was, if you can see, when they were using LLMs, they essentially offloaded all of the work, right? So essentially, the idea is that your cognitive functions work because there's cognitive friction. You use your mind to solve difficult problems. These difficult problems are hard, but you take that effort in order to solve the problem, and that increases brain activity, and that fires those neurons, and that makes you better at that activity the next time you do it. LLMs don't have that capability because you're offloading that task to the LLM. You don't use your mind in that manner. You don't exercise that friction, and therefore, the next time you give your examination, the next time you are without the LLM and you're faced with the same situation, you're not going to be able to solve it, right? And this study showed that students who used LLMs were less engaged, remembered less, and performed less on a later task which they were unassisted by AI, right? So the idea is that you cognitively offload, you basically make the AI do the work, and that unfortunately, and this is again another study done in a law school where they found that, one second, let's go back, AI used in a law school where they found that the tool use of using AI tools in law school was uh, negatively correlated with critical thinking, with the ability to essentially analyze arguments and break them down and argue against them, right? Because AI was doing it for these people, they were not able to train themselves up to do this task better, right? So that's the problem with the idea of completely allowing AI, right? But on the other hand, what if we completely prohibit AI, right? So let's go back to the medieval era. Let us make sure that everybody has physical books, no electronic policy allowed. So New York public school system recently had a new no mobile phones policy where students have to essentially ensure that they don't bring their mobile phones to class, and that increased learning outcomes by some 20%. Why can't we do that same thing for AI? Remove all electronic items from the university, say that all classrooms must be structured around physical sort of material. The problem with that is that AI use is important for practicing lawyers, right? That AI use is an important learned skill that has becoming increasingly relevant in the legal arena, right? So what we know is that law firms around the world, including in India, are now using AI quite liberally, right? So one of the law firm partners that I know said that we are looking forward to basically eliminating the A0, which is the first year associate task load, right? We want basically people who are AI ready. We want people who can come in, take our work processes, which we have fed into the AI, and use it to solve problems that we want to solve, right? And we have again surveys where we see that most people in most lawyers agree that a bulk of the task load of especially law firms will be now done by AI, right? AI improves law firm efficiency. And of course, the clients also demand it, right? If their in-house counsel using AI can do the same work, why will they hire law firms to do this kind of work, right? And so the general economic reality is that we need AI-ready lawyers, right? And AI ready, if you have a medieval classroom, if you ban AI in schools, in law schools, then you're not going to get this, right? The people who you are not preparing the students for the world out there which uses AI, right? And so many people argue that there's a new duty of efficiency, and lawyers have to be trained in this skill in order to be able to work through the idea of how do we do law in the economic markets that we currently engage with, right? And most students think that the law school is not uh, teaching them these skills, right? And so we have a paradox here, right? So become a better lawyer in the eyes of the academy, where we value critical skills. We want them to think without AI, but a student will become a worse lawyer in the market because they are slow and expensive and they're not ready to use AI, right? So this gets us to what I call the polylemma, right? The polylemma is that the institutional choices of policy that law schools have are contradictory to one another, right? We cannot regulate AI because we can't detect it. The incentives are too strong. Our policies and assessments are ineffective. We cannot ban it because the market mandates that we need to have AI skills, and we cannot permit it or we can't encourage it because the cognitive cost of permitting it is that you build lawyers who do not have the critical skills that are required in the legal profession, right? And so this is the polylemma that law schools have, what I call an we're faced with what's called a state of aporia, where law schools, any policy choice that the law schools take is going to end up contradicting one of these lemmas, and going to be in some ways undesirable, right? So that is my sort of my argument in this paper. I know again that this sort of working draft of the paper, and this is based on, as I said, a 2-year study at the law school, which includes a lot of evidence. So a lot of that evidence is not here. All of that has to be added. But what's I think clear from even this sort of cursory look at empirical evidence around the world is that we need to sort of change something, right? The world of Gen AI is not something that we can just solve by policy. Something has to change. Either we have a radical change in the law school, or radical change in the profession, or radical change in the way that we perceive legal education. It is only then can we sort of try and go past this Gen AI problem, right? So yeah, so that's my paper in very short time. But yeah, happy for questions and comments.
Right. Thank you so much, Rahul. And some very interesting and concerning insights shared. And on this note of educational nihilism, I would now like to invite Professor Darshana to give her comments and her feedback on the paper. After Professor Darshana has given her comments, we would be opening up the discussion for other comments and questions from the people who have so kindly joined us today. So I would like to invite Professor Darshana now.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much, Isha, and thank you, Rahul, for that very fascinating presentation. I have four broad buckets of comments, and I'll just maybe perhaps quickly run through them one by one. Or would you like me to ask you a question first, Rahul, and then you can respond to that?
No, maybe I think just run through your comments, and then I'll probably respond to all of them together.
Sure, sure. Okay. So then my first question is that it seems to me that um, even before the use of generative AI became as common as you say it is, a common sort of description of legal education, at least in India, has been that legal education doesn't train us for practice, right? And it's interesting how Gen AI sort of disrupts that, but disrupts that in this strange way where perhaps it's training you for practice, like you said, but it's not really otherwise training you to be a good lawyer in any other critical sense of the term. So I guess one question that I have is that, maybe, and a question and a comment is maybe one of the ways in which we address the use of Gen AI is to really go back to uh, asking ourselves what is legal education for, really? Because I personally actually don't think, and even though I used to be the person who used to say that, oh, law school doesn't train you for practice, I increasingly don't think that the purpose of law school is to teach you marketable skills. It is to teach you to think about the law in very specific manners. So in that sense, law schools function historically has been, and law schools have been situated alongside philosophy departments, because they teach you to think about the world in certain ways, and then that thinking about the world in certain ways is applied either in continuing to think about jurisprudence or in practice, so on and so forth. And maybe then the retreat, if one may call it that, but I wouldn't call it that, from the sort of march of AI into legal education is to go back into framing legal education differently and not so closely tied to the market. So that was one comment that I had. But law schools have always, at least in India, have historically been terrible at training people for practice. So that's that. This is a pre-AI problem that we've had. The second thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is a question, is that you know you've talked about how there's a certain use of AI in law schools, and then there's of course law firms demand that you also know AI quite well. But I'm wondering whether, and then you've set that up as a contradiction, which is that if I don't teach you AI in law school, then you don't have skills in the law firm. But I'm wondering if some of this is a bit apples and oranges, because in law school, what are students using AI for? They're using AI to write mostly term papers, right? Or create notes. Um, I'm wondering if there's a study out there which looks at what kind of skills in AI in law schools versus what kind of, like, document review in a law firm is something that, very, at least in India, very few law schools have courses that teach you how to review contracts, right? Like, some clinical courses will teach you to do that, but by and large, I'm pretty sure most of us went through law schools, never review a contract in our lives in the classroom. We did that in our internships, right? Um, so, and when doing that, yes, AI is useful, but I still need to fundamentally know what a contract looks like and what are the elements of a contract, which is what I learn by applying my and honing my critical thinking abilities in the classroom. Then I use that in, with, I supplement that with AI. It's a different set of skills that we're talking about entirely in the office. So I'm wondering whether some of this is apples and oranges, that, because one kind of use of AI in the law school is stymieing the development of critical thinking for faculties in law students, but the other kind of use of AI that we're looking at law firms is really augmenting capacity that already exists. Which would not exist had that students' legal education been entirely AI moderated. So this is really a question about the kinds of studies that have been done on comparing AI usage and then, skills that people acquire. Um, the third point and sort of question that I had was that I think it was quite interesting that I think there's a gap that perhaps NLS can fill, perhaps you can fill, in that while there's been a lot of studies on the use of AI in law firms, most litigation practice in India doesn't happen through law firms, right? It happens through, like, like trial practice, for example, in most parts of the country are like individual chamber practices where also AI is being used, but the nature of the everyday drafting is very different, right? You're drafting a bail application, you're drafting an IA, you're drafting a maintenance application, etc., etc., an exemption petition, whatever, right? So, and I wonder if, I think there's merit in looking at how AI usage changes that, right? Um, and changes the nature of practice, whether for good or for bad, because I can imagine that that wouldn't fit, like, that would look very, very materially different from how AI usage is happening in law firms, right? Where there's obviously a clear hierarchy, but the nature of the tasks is also different. So that was the third comment that I had. My fourth is a quibble, but I feel like I must make that quibble. You've used the word medieval very frequently to describe the device-less classroom. I'm going to carbon date myself and say that when I was in law school in 2007, we didn't have that many devices in the classroom, right? I didn't have a laptop till my second year. So, and I was taking notes by hand. So it's not I object to the use of the term medieval, also because I want us to think of, again, this goes back to my first question, which is that um, I don't think it's possible for a law student in their first, second, or third year also to be able to pretend to be a lawyer also, right? We try to do that through clinical legal education, for example, but we recognize that, you spent at least the first 3 years of your legal education just thinking about the law. And slowness has an enormous element to play there, that sort of space for slow thinking and sitting with texts. Um, and and I'm wondering whether there's a way to sort of bring that back in how we conceptualize legal education. This is really, I'm like asking my first question all over again, but it wasn't that long back that we were sitting in classrooms without devices and turned out to be perfectly decent lawyers. Yeah. Okay. So these are my basic comments. But thank you so much, Rahul. This is very interesting for me to listen to.
Yeah, thanks, Darshana. Thanks for your questions and your comments. I think all of them are very, very interesting and good to think about. So let me start with the question of whether we prepare students for practice or not. And there, I think uh, it dis the question comes down to, I mean, it's not about how Darshana or Sudhir or Rahul thinks about legal education, right? It's about what kinds of students enter the legal education space and what are their objectives and what are the ways in which the market interacts with those objectives. So be it as it may that we want to teach foundational skills and we want to basically have a slow classroom that, you and I mean, it was a bit too slow for me and even at that time, but classrooms without laptops, and we do have classrooms right now without laptops, as you know, even at NLS, right? But I think that reality of how we imagine a lawyer is actually not the way in which law firms imagine a law graduate anymore. Now, whether we should cater for that or not is a normative question, but necessarily if we don't cater to that, then our students will lose out to other students in other law schools which do not have that view of legal education. So we have to come to terms with that reality. Now we can, and if we make that choice, that is fine. But that is the market reality affects the ways in which the kinds of students that we get and the kinds of students that eventually graduate and the kinds of work that they think is valuable, right? So I'm not sure how much we can control the narrative in terms of what legal academia does. Now, you talked about the NLS or sort of the law school's vision of how things are, and you correctly pointed out that most law schools don't prepare, especially in India, don't prepare their graduates for practice. But in their freedom, in the way that they sort of cut down on the curriculum, in the fact that GLC graduates or graduates in the University of Madras can intern while the law school is going on, in just that freedom, they connect to the practice. And if you have that model of education, if you have an apprenticeship model of education, that is fine, right? That allows for this ability to cater to the legal profession in a natural way. We in fact then might be the people who are keeping them away from this. So it's like, one of the first internships I had was a law office in Bangalore where they had all the databases. They had SCC Online, they had Manupatra, but they used to make the interns use the index books and the physical versions of SCC. And we used to feel so frustrated because we used to go with a case and they used to be like, yeah, we already know it. Yeah, of course you know it because you've used the database, and that's the point. But I guess, yeah, I think therein lies my initial sort of hesitation in a law school vision, which entails a creative, slow thinker as its central model. And we know for a fact that works in some cases. We think that our graduates, if trained like this, will excel in whatever ways possible. But I fear that the market doesn't think the same way, and I fear our students or potential students who want to join the profession would not think the same way. So I think therein still the paradox will continue to lie. On the question of litigation, yes, there is the question of how litigators use AI and how lawyers use AI, law firms use AI is different. In fact, at least the litigators that I have spoken to are people who use AI much more in terms of, because it is actually better for those kinds of tasks. It's better for routine drafting tasks than for complex contractual arrangements and strategic elements in particular, right? It can do some form of sort of review based, it can do some forms of contract review and due diligence, but it can't do strategic elements so well. So it's actually better for some of these litigation tasks. The problem, of course, is technical literacy as well as just general, what we can call inertia in adopting AI from a lot of the legal community in India. And that I think once the floodgates open, they will open, right? And I think it's just a matter of time as to the kind of AI use that the lawyers will use. And all your apples and oranges question of what entails, what kind of things they use AI for and what they don't. I think even access in some ways makes a better student for a law firm who's trying to use AI in a particular way. Even familiarity, even opening up the chat, even a question like what is the best way of prompting, that helps a student get better. So and again, this is coming from student testimonials themselves, right? A student told me that because of your course and because I did this prompting guide thing, I did well in my internship where I used Harvey AI. right? So it seems to me that AI skill sets are a question of experimentation and of use rather than training. There is the training element as well, and we do again have courses on AI and AI use. But I think the sort of general outlook of the law firms is that there must be somebody who's competent with the technology, and competence in the technology is more of a use and practice thing, right? And which our students are very good at, even though we might want them not to be so good at it. Yeah.
Right. Darshana, do you have any further comments or replies in response to what Rahul just said?
Yeah, just I guess this, and
Yeah.
I think one thing for us to think about, and I think lemma 7 or 8 in your paper is the question of critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
That the thing that I think law firms and law schools would agree on is that a lawyer has to have critical thinking abilities,
Yeah.
and often it is difficult for a student themselves in the process of learning to observe what's happening to them as they go through certain learning processes. It is only
Yeah.
in its application in the real world that the student recognizes, oh, this thing that I learned
Yeah.
is useful to me in this material way, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think Abhinav in the chat box has basically summarized my question, which is that it doesn't, maybe it's not a zero sum game at all, that a effective competent market ready lawyer is also someone who has the critical thinking skills, which otherwise they're going to sort of tap out at some minimal level of base level of competence and never be able to proceed beyond that. And the challenge is, how do you regulate or not AI usage to allow for that critical thinking ability to develop? But yeah, that was just my general comment. I think
Yeah.
questions and answers should be taken up. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. And the first question is, and I'm not sure the whether this is within the ambit of your paper, but you can choose to answer.
Yeah, so yeah, Isha,
Yeah.
I think I can take all three questions that are
Okay.
there on the chat. So
Yeah.
what legal issues are associated with AI-driven online examinations and remote proctoring? Again, there is some studies on this. There's some empirical evidence on the question of AI proctoring and examinations. Nothing conclusive, but again, these systems are not fail-safe, right? And jailbreaking, which is basically tricking the AI, is always possible. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game between technologies, right? Detection technologies and cheating technologies, right? And this is true of plagiarism. This is true of AI use. This is true of AI proctoring. This is true of all possible technological ways of in which you can bypass particular technological systems, right? So as AI detectors become better, so will AI technology to get past that detection, right? As proctoring systems become better, so will the jailbreaking systems that people use to break such proctoring systems. So it's always going to be this debate is already going to be there. But in terms of legal issues, I mean, there are lots of legal issues of privacy, of integrity, of things such as the liability effect of false detection, etc. But that's again not something that I study, but there are lots of legal issues. Can AI be replaced with a judge? In what context? So, can AI be replaced by a judge? I think the question usually framed as, can a judge be replaced by AI? In terms of whether we should have AI use in the judicial system, which is a completely different conversation, but again, quite a relevant one. There are lots of states which are coming out with how AI use, in some sense, can be done in the judiciary. What are the ethical issues associated with it? What are legal issues associated with it? And what are the problems in dealing with some of these questions? Abhinav asked, I wonder whether market ready or having critical thinking skills is really so much of a zero-sum game. Surely law schools wants their associates to be able to engage in critical thinking. The correct option means to be allow AI use in legal system, make clear the cognitive costs of it. Perhaps the AI training mentioned in the slides is relevant here. Rational students wanting employment will learn AI while also taking care of the critical thinking capacity. No, I'm not claiming that it's a zero-sum game in terms of
the skills that students can bring to bear in their law firm life, right? My problem is one of how do you decide policy, right? How do you engage the with legal education, keeping in mind that you have this objective at the end of the day to have AI ready lawyers as well. And I'm saying that policy question is very difficult to answer if you also want them not to use AI. And this idea of telling students being and informing them about the dangers doesn't seem to work, right? So and there are studies on this, right? So the Ali Madrani study that I talked about was precisely this. There were instructions on how to use AI. There were instructions on how to not use AI. People used it exactly in the way that he suggested they ought not to use it, right? So I'm not sure simply disclaimer-based sort of policies where you just say, okay, AI use is affects critical thinking. AI use makes you worse lawyers in some respects because you can't verify output. AI should not be used in XXX tasks because AI is bad at it. All of these things are good, and all of these things can be included in the curriculum, but I'm not sure that's enough to stop students from using AI when they shouldn't, AI in tasks that they shouldn't, etc. Right? Because again, if it's undetectable and it increases grades, the incentives are there, and so it's difficult to think of why students will not use AI. Rudvik, of course, has written the longest question here. AI use in education seems more sympathetic to an overall disregard towards legal education to begin with. What is legal education for? Its purpose to teach ways, why not create organic incentives to study the law and its method and not just create disincentives from using AI? Cognitive friction is process of learning is necessary, and this friction can be an enjoyable process. Maybe this is right looking at the state students generally are in, and why they feel removed from this rewarding work to begin with. For example, maybe some information on the purpose of certain reading, where it's placed in the larger scheme, encouraging more small group tutorial systems in work and done slowly and deliberately. Maybe pandering to the market incentivizes more problems sometimes. Thus, this, I suppose, warrants looking at need for efficiency and performance within the market. Are we just to educate keeping a specific kind of employability as a key pursuit almost? I mean, again, I agree. I agree that if we can create environments which preserve the critical integrity of our curriculum, as well as be able to motivate students to become better cognitive thinkers, which we think, right? And again, there's empirical evidence to the contrary, right? There's empirical evidence that if you don't have access to AI and if you don't use AI, then regardless of your general intelligence levels, you are going to suffer when an AI related task is given to you. In fact, there are studies which show that somebody who has AI can perform better than an expert level scholar if given enough time and given enough training on AI, not the specific subject matter. So there is great evidence that legal work can be made more efficient and better using AI. The question, of course, is where does cognitive skills fit in? And cognitive skills do fit in multiple ways. One, as I said, in terms of the verification paradox, which is if AI creates bad work, how do you verify it if you don't know what is good work? There is cognitive skills in terms of how do you build prompts, and there's cognitive skills in areas where AI is bad at, which is areas of practice such as strategic dispute resolution, which is taking into account human activity and human behavior and then responding to it. AI is obviously not in this world, and so it's bad at it. So clearly there is some idea on terms of what is the cognitive skills which are required for a lawyer and the fact that AI is important in the market. Now, I would hesitate to say that we can create incentives for students to build these cognitive skills on their own while having a permissive AI policy. Right? I think that is not possible. I think that there lies the policy challenge. If we can sort of, and of course, if you're a great teacher and if you can motivate your students and build interesting ways in which to use AI, sure. But on a law school policy issue, I'm not sure that's so easy, right? And I'm not sure that the market, again, will respond. And like I responded to Darshana's question, I don't think the market is there yet. And it is clear every law firm after law firm is changing its recruitment policies and asking questions such as, are you familiar with AI? And again, I have some law school anecdotes to talk about to evidence this. Vidita Mahajan asks, on the point of cognitive decline, students often use AI to refine an argument, such as a sparring partner, which may actually serve the same role as a tutor in a tutorial. Can AI then be considered a useful tool to improve critical thinking skills when you have limited resources? Yes, I mean, there's again a lot of studies on AI tutoring and how it can improve cognitive thinking. Again, the problem lies as to how do you build policy around it, right? How do you say, okay, so let's assume that you have an assignment and you say that I want you to reach an answer, I want you to solve a negotiation problem. I have given you this AI tutor. Please use it only to mimic a conversation, mimic a negotiation with a person who is adversarial in these points. How do you know then the student will not simply simulate the entire conversation and then say, go to ChatGPT and say, simulate a conversation with a negotiator, right? It's easier for the students. It possibly gets them better grades, right? And it completely sort of bypasses the cognitive function that the AI tutor was supposed to serve, right? By the way, AI tutoring is hard to design as well, right? It is in most cases very non-interactive and boring to interact with a machine, right? And so even there, I think the incentives are for the student to simply ignore it all and just, you know, max out on the assessment in whatever, with using whatever tools they can. So that's my general sense of the AI tutor system. Though again, if there are creative ways in which you can use it and you can integrate into the policy, that's where it becomes interesting. But I think the policy question still remains, even if you have individual cases where AI tutors can increase the way in which people are using cognitive resources. When calculators were first introduced, there was widespread concern at the school level. As a result, calculators were permitted only after a certain stage of education, by which time students had already developed foundational competencies, and the tool was used primarily to enhance speed and accuracy rather than replace understanding. Can a similar stage, a subject-specific approach be adopted for use of artificial intelligence in legal education, where AI is used only later stages in select subjects, so that law school first develop essential these skills, critical thinking, reasoning, analytical skills during their foundational years. This is what the law school is trying to do here, right? We do have electives on AI and AI training, but we offer them in our advanced years. And the idea is, again, in the first few years, we don't allow students to use AI. Does that mean students don't use AI? No. All students of NLS, as I said, use AI. And this is, as I said, we have surveys to show this, we have anecdotal evidence to show this, but even their assignments show this, right? So even though I said AI cannot be detected, or in an individual case, we can see average detection rates, right? We can see across a set of papers whether a batch is using AI more than an earlier batch. And you can see in 2022, and then you go to 2023 and 2024 and 2025, suddenly the word intricate starts increasing in its frequency of use, right? So it's not like intricate suddenly became a HEP word after 2023, right? Intricate is a word used by AI quite often. Ultimately is a word used by AI quite often in the last paragraph. Nobody uses, I mean, so if there is general evidence across all assignments that students are using these words, and of course you can't pinpoint, maybe one person used in ultimately on their own as a human, and so obviously you can't say that that is an AI generated script. But on average, if the entire batch is starting using ultimately or intricately or tapestry more, then that points to a systemic issue of everybody using AI. So despite policy at the law school, right, there is this policy. There is a policy of strict no AI. There's a policy where first year subjects are more foundational. They deal with foundational readings. They test skills, and we're trying to also remove AI from assessments. So assessments are either based on orality or examination. Despite all of those safeguards, people use AI, right? So therein lies the paradox, right? Therein lies the problem, that how do you stop this? If it's undetectable and if it improves your grades, how do you stop it? And that is the challenge, right? And it is a challenge not like calculators, because whatever you did with your calculator, you had to bring your calculator, right? And you can ban computers, you can buy mobile phones, but you can't ban the use of AI in anything that is outside a controlled environment. And that will remain a challenge for the foreseeable future. Okay, there's quite a few questions, so I'm going to try and speed up. Isha, can you do me a favor and try and find a couple of questions which I can answer, because I think many have come in while I think I'm taking too much time to answer the questions also, but I have some time, but I can answer a few of them. Yeah.
Right. We can maybe just take two more questions, if that is okay, because I
Yeah.
mean, time is up.
Yeah.
So, right. So somebody, I think Mr. Okay, so I mean, the other questions I don't think relate specifically to the paper. So I'm going to take Ramakash's question, who says, considering the conclusion that Rahul appears to conclude, is it a good idea to get back to the ancient method of handwritten assignments so that students at least write down AI generated answers and learn by writing at least? Or as Rahul did for my class under him, to have surprise handwritten tests on the spot?
Yeah, thanks, Ramakash. And sorry for all of those surprise handwritten tests. So Darshana and I did try this in our CPC course as well, where we had specifically asked students to handwrite all of their written assignments, right? And we had written assignments every day or every week or something like that, right? Yeah, so they essentially had to, we knew that they could use AI, but at least they had to do the effort of putting their AI stuff right into writing. Student feedback was actually quite interesting. They actually liked the process, at least in terms of learning to do case law. But I'm not so sure that's a great solution. I think one thing is, of course, it's torturing students for no reason, and especially students who are don't like to handwrite and like to think, like to read the case and make notes on their laptops, etc. I think it's burdening them unnecessarily, but also I think this idea that AI writing assignment which is AI generated in some ways is cognitively helpful to students. Uh, I am, I think I'm open to think about the idea. I think it's a decent alternative. It's probably what we could end up with in some cases, but I'm not sure it solves the problem, right? And in terms of policy, it doesn't solve the problem at all, because again, you're not solving for the question of academic integrity because of AI, right? You're just solving for the question that, okay, students will learn this. They won't learn 100%, they'll learn some 20% because they're writing it. So that still is an issue. And by the way, I mean, even AI use in NLS at least is relatively sophisticated, right? It's not like students generate an AI answer and then copy paste it and then send it. They do sort of work with it and try and sort of mold it to a better answer and mold it to bypass detectors, basically.
Right. So the questions which have been asked by Mr. Hitrath Shetty, Devyanshu, Misbah and Vishal, they mostly relate to, largely from my understanding, on what is the right approach to handle AI. So perhaps we can, if you can answer, what would be sort of a practical and fair generative AI policy for evaluation and legal education in terms of what is prohibited, what is allowed. I know this is a very, very wide and
No,
broad
but
question.
that's sort of
Yeah,
my
yeah,
that's sort of what I'm arguing against, right? I'm
yeah,
arguing against the fact that any policy is relatively
yeah,
satisfactory.
yeah,
That's the polylemma. The fact that no policy is practically great, and every policy has some problems because it violates one of the fundamental tenets of what we view as traditional legal education. So I don't think policies are the way in which we do it. Like Darshana pointed out, we have to fundamentally rethink what are we doing here, right? And we have to think about,
yeah,
okay, are we here to basically create legal philosophers or thinkers, or are we here to create market-ready lawyers, or are we here to do AI training, which of course lawyers are not best placed to train anyway. So maybe we
right.
should all have technologists take over our jobs and teach technology to law students. But this kind of fundamental rethink is required. I think policy-wise, I think we've already lost, so to say. I think it's almost impossible now to solve these issues just by policy alone.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you. And it's a very interesting idea that if we just think in terms of these parochial silos, then probably we're just left with very few choices, right? So it does require some fundamental rethinking of the role of legal education. But thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who was able to join us today. And we're very sorry if we were not able to engage with everybody's comments and questions, but there was paucity of time. Thanks a lot to Professor Darshana for her very, very insightful comments. It was lovely to have you. And thanks a lot to Rahul as well, who is the faculty director of the center. And thank you for presenting his paper. This was a fascinating discussion for me, considering this is an issue that we deal with on an everyday basis. And we hope to see all of you next month. And it would be lovely to have everyone for next month's discussion as well. So till then, thanks a lot, and uh, happy evening and happy New Year.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Isha. Thanks, Rahul.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.